was there, he came back as an artist to make art in that village. And that's when he found these mezcals and got fascinated by them. And as part of an art project, tried to bring the mezcal back to share it with his friends and make the art, the liquid art, part of his art. And as you can imagine, he was told there was no way he was allowed to bring it in. But if you know Ron Cooper, you know that you can't tell Ron that he can't do something. Ron found a way to do it, and we are the lucky recipients, because as a result, we have those amazing green bottles and the amazing liquid in them. And I just want to say one thing before we turn this to Ron and have him tell a little bit of the story, is that we are not distillers and we do not make mezcal. And it's very important that you understand that. We are so incredibly lucky these days. We work now with 12 different families in 12 remote villages in Oaxaca and Puebla. We work with 14 or 15 different species of maguey. And we take the family's liquid art from the still and put it directly into those green bottles and ship it to you exactly the way it comes out of the still. We don't touch it. And it's really, really important that you understand that, because that is our way of bringing their art to you. Now, Ron, I'm going to bring you in right now because you just got to say a word about that crazy picture and your first experience with, well, let's just say it wasn't mezcal like you get to experience on your back wall in your photo right now.
Well, first of all, I think I see that there are 115 participants, which is amazing.
Wow.
Hello to everybody. Thank you, Steve and Misty and Gabe. A work of art is successful to me if it transforms the viewer. It can be a nude, a sunset, garbage, words on a canvas. It can be anything, but it has to transform the viewer. So when I began to find these farmer-made mezcals and sip them, they were truly transformational. So they actually fulfilled my criteria for a successful work of art. The picture is a group of art students in '62. We all went from LA down to Ensenada. And if you look carefully, there's a guy with a beard kind of pretending to be passed out on the table in that image, and that's me. Just standing around. But I actually, for 5 days in a row, went to Husong's Cantina, this rustic, famous, Ruli bar in this port south of Tijuana. And I was the fool 5 nights in a row, waiting for the worm to come down in a bottle of Monte Alban, which kind of back then was a little bit like diesel fuel, but it was a smoky diesel fuel. And I had never had an agave spirit before. And every evening I'd crawl back to this bar from the beach, still hungover, hoping for a beer to cure my hangover. And I would go, what was that? So that was my first introduction to mezcal, even before tequila. And it was a very interesting experience.
So some years later, Ron and a couple of artist buddies.
Oh, hold on. So now.
Ah, there he is, the man.
We're going to have to start
Look
with
how handsome he is.
a little Steve Bayo
Yeah,
here.
it's that time.
Okay.
I'm with you, Ron.
And Steve Bayo is a Zapotec word for to your health, to the healthier friends, and the life of the planet, because this is a ritual beverage. So I'm going to pour a few drops on the floor, on the earth, for Mother Earth and our ancestors. I've done that, and now we can have a sip. Here's to you all. Steve Bay.
Steve Bay. Oh, I feel better already. A little saca palabras, Ron? So,
Much better.
so here is a picture of the artist in 1971. You'll see how incredibly handsome he still is. Ron, some years later then, after that crazy experience down there, Ron and a couple of his artist buddies decided that they needed to determine whether or not the Pan American Highway truly exists. And as a result, they jumped in their van with their surfboards and headed down to Mexico. And on that trip, they found Teotitlán del Valle. Now, we today are celebrating 25 years, and we have worked in Teotitlán del Valle ever since Ron's original trip there. Because when Ron decided it was his mission to share this incredible artisanal mezcal with his friends, he, of course, went back to the source, to the place where he had originally been based when he was going up into the mountains to find these great producers. And we will talk about each of them and how they joined us. But Ron, maybe talk a little bit about this art right here, because this is really the part of the instigation of how mezcal got to all of us and how you started sharing it with your friends in the first place.
In 1972, when Jim Ganser and Robbie Dick and I set out to see if the Pan American Highway really existed, we left LA and we got to Panama 4 months later, but on the way, we found Oaxaca and this weaving village. And I made friends there. We did a project that changed the life of the village, 1,000 weavings, exhibition in galleries and museums in the United States. And I kept going back to Teotitlán del Valle over the years. And in 1990, I had some fuck you money and could go anywhere I wanted to go in the world. And I had finished these 2 large bronze commissions in Los Angeles. And I said, oh man, I can finally go to Japan. And this little voice said, no, no, no. You're going to Oaxaca. You're going to collaborate with indigenous artisans. So I called my old buddy, Arnulfo Mendoza, and I asked if he knew where I could rent a house. And he said, I'll give you a house. And I went down for 3 months. And the idea was to collaborate with indigenous artisans. And I made weavings with my imagery, using Arnulfo's workshop. He was the greatest weaver in Mexico. And I wanted to make stone sculptures based on the corn grinder, the mano and metate, male, female, grinding, making each other smoother and finer. And I was making these strange vessels out of bronze that were vases, and they shaped the air around them, the heaviest material I had ever used, shaping air. And if you look at this blue bottle, the idea was that this shape created the profile of the supreme god of intoxication and ecstasy, Ometochli. And I was going to create a blue glass bottle in Oaxaca and find the best mezcal and fill it with that mezcal as an artistic edition of 50 bottles. So every 3rd day in Oaxaca, I went out a dirt road and I asked an Indian, ¿Dónde está el mejor? Where is the best? And they answered in their language, which I could not understand, but I could follow their hand. And I never said, where's the best mezcal? I said, where's the best? ¿Dónde está el mejor? And they pointed me, and I went down these dirt roads for hours and hours, no signs whatsoever, and little dirt roads leaving to the right and the left. And I had to decide which way to go, what looked more traveled. And I would drive down these roads until I found a giant stone grinding wheel in a field. And I would go ask the farmer, because this was for grinding maguey. And I'd ask the farmer, how do you do this? And I began to hang out with these farmers and collect their beautiful elixir. And it became apparent to me that their mezcals were the real pure mezcal, unlike Monte Alban, which was adulterated. And the closer any mezcal got to the city by kilometer, the more contaminated it became. They added water, and they added cane alcohol, they added flavoring and coloring. Not the producers, but people that were commercializing these mezcals. So my mission was to bring Del Bueno, the good stuff, to share with me and my friends in the United States.
I think, I think that's a really, really important thing to just settle on for a second, is that, Ron did the toast just now and reminded us that the mezcal to the villagers is a ritual beverage and is ancient. It's an ancestral process. It's very traditional. It's very cultural. The culture of the village surrounds the production of this mezcal. And when you go to a Zapotec home, for example, they're not sitting around drinking mezcal. Mezcal is reserved for very, very special occasions, for religious ceremonies, for birthdays and weddings and funerals and baptisms and Semana Santa and Navidad and Dia de los Muertos. It's very, very spiritual. And Ron's original mission, and here you see some old photos of Teotitlán del Valle back in the beginning. Ron's original mission was to share this beautiful art with his friends. That was the key. He couldn't bring it in. They wouldn't let him bring it in. So he said, well, I'm going to find a way to share it with my friends. And we very quickly, I was lucky enough to go down just a couple of years later and go to the villages, and my life changed forever as I saw and met and became involved with the families. I saw the process and I experienced what they were doing, and there was no way they could be making this elixir out of this ancient procedure. And our mission has evolved to the point now that it's about protecting that culture and preserving that ancient process. And we consider it a great honor that we have the opportunity to do that and work with these families to bring their mezcal to the world. This is the original bodega. When I visited Ron the first time, this is what it looked like. Ron lived here and made his mezcal here, or bottled the mezcal here, rather. It would come down from the mountains in the back of that car or his pickup, and he would bring it down in beer kegs, and he would bottle it right here. And that's how it came to the United States originally. So all the way back then, all right, and there's the bodega today. You can see it's expanded a little bit. It's still pretty small. Ron, you just started to talk about going up there it is. You see what it says up there? Nadie es perfecto. No one's perfect. Ron, you started talking, and this is a perfect transition. Thank you, Misty. Ron, you started talking about going up into the mountains, long dirt roads, finding the best. I want to start with the beginning. The very first mezcal that ever was shipped by Maguey Single Village Mezcal from Oaxaca to the United States of America was shipped to Ron's home in Taos, New Mexico, and it was Chichicapa. And Ron, if you could, just go back to when you went with the family out to Chichicapa and how you met Faustino, and tell us about that origin, because to me that really is the perfect place to start, because that's where you started.
Well, first of all, the first shipment of 58 boxes of mezcal in 1995, December 16th, hit the border. And U.S. Customs in Albuquerque cheered because I had been asking them for 5 years how do you get this into the country? What do I have to do? And I got an import license in the United States, and I got an export license in Mexico. And the help given to me by these U.S. Customs officers in Albuquerque, New Mexico, was incredible. So they cheered, and some mezcal made its way to my place, but basically my buddy Rusty cleared it because I was in Mexico, and it went to Mark Miller at Coyote Cafe the same day that it cleared customs. And Mark Miller created the first cocktail with Del Maguey called the Smokin' Margarita. Anyway, and that was with Chichicapa. My weaving buddies in Teotitlan del Valle, one day, three brothers invited me to go to collect yarn with them. And we were going to go to this remote village called Chichicapa that took 4 hours over dirt, rock, mud, roads. So we left at 3 in the morning in this VW van. And at 7 in the morning, we got to the village of Chichicapa. It's actually called San Baltasar Chichicapam or San Baltasar Chichicapan, depending on which end of the village you enter. The government sign reads differently both ways, but the weavers always called it Chichicapa. So that's what I call it. And we got there at 7 in the morning, a chilly winter morning, and it was the only car in the village. And amazingly, all the women in the village could hear this VW van puttering into the village, and they were all standing outside their front door holding a half kilo of yarn in each hand, a ball of woven spun yarn, different colors from different colored sheep. And my three buddies, the three brothers, negotiated with the women, purchased the yarn. At, I don't know, 9 o'clock, we had cruised through the whole village, and the entire VW van was full up to the windows. We were covered in yarn, and we were hungry. When we got out of the van to go to a woman's house that would cook us breakfast, and my buddy said, "Hey, let's go get a mezcal." And we walked up an arroyo, and here was a group of guys working, uncovering a roast that was steaming, that had been buried for 3 days over hot rocks. And a young guy there poured us a little copita of mezcal, and it was totally mind-blowing. It was totally transformational. The guy's name was Faustino Garcia Vasquez, and I asked him if I could get some. Could I buy something? He said, "There is no more." I said, "Well, will you make me some more?" And he said, "Yes. Come back in a month and I will make you 300 liters. And it turned out that he was the poorest guy in the village, but he made the best mezcal. And he didn't have his own palenque. He had to rent somebody else's palenque. He hired his friends to go up in the mountains and harvest firewood and harvest agave he had planted 10 or 12 years previous and bring them all down. And he paid his buddies in his mezcal that they helped make. And he paid the guy whose palenque he rented with his mezcal. And sure enough, a month later, I went back And here was 300 liters waiting for me. And I tasted it and I went, what the fuck are you doing? This isn't what I tasted. And he went, wait, calmitate, take it easy. And he said, it's like a newborn baby. You know, it's just come into the world. You got to give it some time. Well, 2 weeks later, that mezcal was identical. And the flavor of Chichicapa, Faustino's, the flavor of his mezcal has never changed in 25 years, or 30 years actually, because I met him in 90. So in 30 years, his mezcal always has his signature flavor profile. What
And
more
it
can
never will change.
I?
Faustino he is such an artist. Watching him work, just every little detail of how he even puts the sombrero on the top of the alambique is just amazing to watch. And one of the, one of the side benefits, if you will, that has become something we could have never planned or imagined. But in this particular case, actually in every case we're going to talk about today, this is a great example of the kids. Virtually everybody in Oaxaca at some point or another has to go to the United States to make a living and send money home to their family. And there's Faustino, the original label in 1995. That's the photo that Ron took, and then the label that he made from it. And there, Ron, you had described him to me as the Oaxacan Marlboro man. And if you look at him, I mean, he's so handsome, right? But what I was going to say is that some years later, his son, Max, came home. And there he is. And thank you, Misty. Right on cue. And Max and his father, and of course the whole family, they all work together. Everybody works together. But now they're partners, which is amazing and beautiful. And it's because of all of you on this chat right now, because you have provided for this family a way for them to make a living. And now their art is so coveted by the world that there's a reason for Max to be home. Now, I just want to make sure and make it clear. When Ron says the flavor has never changed, nothing has changed. Everything is made exactly the way it was then. It is completely traditional, we can't say ancestral because we've appropriated that term to be part of the new rules there, and that implies that it would be a clay still. And in this case,
the only thing that's changed is that I bought Faustino a still.
Yeah, well,
And
instead of having to rent one,
so we built a palenque for him, and now he's got 3 stills.
Isn't that amazing?
And how many fermentation tanks has he got?
He's got 10 now, Ron. 10 fermentation tanks. It's amazing. When we started, he had 1 still, and he had 2 fermentation tanks, and then he went to 3. And there's Sabina. It's really important to understand that the entire family is involved. There's no way we're talking about the men who actually make the mezcal, but in every case, in every family, there's no way that anyone in this family could do what they do without everyone working as a team. And the women are every bit as involved in the process in every aspect of it. Everyone has their jobs, and everyone does them with great dedication and honor. So that's thank you for that beautiful story, Ron.
Because next, Dave.
I think next. I'm not sure where the next photo goes. Yeah, there we are. It's time. We're going to go to San Luis del Rio because in that same year, in the very beginning, the first 2 palenques that Ron chose to work with were Chichicapa and San Luis del Rio. And the relationship with Paciana goes back as far as it does with Faustino. We're going back, more than 25 years now, when Ron first visited this tiny, tiny little town. Now, for anyone who's been to San Luis del Rio, if you've seen it lately, it doesn't look anything like that. Now, it's still not a city, but it has become a center for agave, for maguey growing, and for mezcal production. At that time, he was one of only 2 or 3 producers who were making basically moonshine. And today there are more than 20 registered producers in this village, which is quite remarkable. So Ron, tell us a little bit about what San Luis del Rio was like and what Paciana was like. I'm going to say this before you go, is that You know, growing up on a farm in the Midwest, in Iowa, as a matter of fact, I always felt that my grandfather was the smartest man in the world and knew everything there was to know about the land. He, as a farmer, it was as if he was one with the land. And I remember many, many years ago, Ron, when we were in the fields with Paciano walking, and I was listening to Paciano explaining things about the field. And I remember turning to you and saying, you know, he's my age, but he reminds me of my grandfather, the way he understands the earth. It not like he studied it, but like they study together. He's one with the earth. He is perhaps the greatest farmer that and certainly the greatest Maguey farmer that I've ever met. So I will preface it with that. And then the other thing that I will preface it with, it is because of that man right there that we have Vida. Everybody knows Vida. It is because of Paciano Cruz Nolasco that we have Vida. So Ron, tell us about your first encounters with Paciano and him as a man and the village and what it was like back then, 25 years ago.
Well, we call him El Gordo, and we also talk about him being 2 guys wide. He's a powerful dude.
He's so strong.
Anyway, I loaded my buddy Pancho and his mother and his wife and his 2 daughters in my 1968 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, which had big truck tires on it and a whole new undercarriage. And it was the first vehicle I took to Oaxaca. And people looked at it like it was a flying saucer. It was outrageous. It had those orange truck lights across the forehead, had big fog lights. It was way up off the ground. It had a whole new undercarriage. It was powerful. It was amazing. We took the back seat out and we put beer barrels in the back, stainless steel beer barrels in the back and the trunk and where the back seat was, and we could haul mezcal with it. So it was a Saturday morning, and in 1990, I had been to a little restaurant at the county seat called Tlacolula. And, you know, I forget what I had. I had tacos or something. And after this lunch, they brought me a little sip of mezcal, just as a gift, you know, a little, what do you call it after you have some food?
Little digestivo.
Digestivo, you know. So I tasted it and I went, where did this come from? And they said, oh, San Luis del Rio. Well, turns out, you know, 5 years later it was him, but I couldn't forget that mezcal. So on this Saturday, I said to Pancho, let's go take a trip to San Luis. So we load mom, the wife, the daughters, and we head off with a map. And we go south of Oaxaca a couple hours, and we go on this 16-kilometer dirt and rock road. And we come to this tiny village of San Luis del Rio. Saturday, we drive all the way through the village to this little municipio, and the whole cabildo, the whole village government, were sitting on the front porch and having a meeting. And Pancho, speaking Zapotec, got out, and I got out. The women went to church with the girls, and we went to the village and we said, you know, this gringo here wants to get some of your mezcal and take it to the world, you know, take it out for he and his friends. Is there anyone here that makes mezcal that we can talk to? Dead silence. Nobody said a word. They just looked at us like, well, the flying saucer was parked there in front of them, and they didn't know Pancho, who from Teotitlán del Valle. They didn't know, they'd never seen a gringo before, and they said nothing. So we kind of like, it's kind of like, we got scared with, okay, thank you. I think we'll leave now. Goodbye. And we backed up and went to the church and got the women and the girls, loaded the car and slowly cruised down out of town. And this guy, if we can go back to look at that picture of Paciano, this guy came running after us and he said, I make mezcal. I make the best mezcal in the village. And we went, okay, when can we try it? He said, I don't have any now. Come back in a month. And we came back in a month and met up with with Paciano Cruz Nolasco, and the rest is history. He is the most powerful producer. He actually likes planting agave more than making mezcal. This is his palenque. The river is right behind. Um, Here they are grinding agave that's been roast. Uh, there he is, and I think that's me. I think that's my back. Anyway, open air, 3 tinas, 3 fermentation tanks, one still, and this is where our San Luis del Rio began.
Now, I want to point out, oh, there we are. This is, speaking of the spirituality and ritual aspect of mezcal, I mean, this is what we see everywhere. All of the producers, they're very, very spiritual. And, you'll see a cross on the roast, you'll see a cross on the ferment, you'll see an altar around the distillation, because they need, they seek the blessing, of the gods. And in this particular case, this is the
And
altar
protect
at
from the
the hill.
evil eye too.
Well,
You gotta be careful.
malojo, yeah. You don't want to mess with the evil eye, because that could ruin a roast or make a stuck ferment, as we would call it. And again, another situation where, Marcos, the son, came home and is now working with his father. And I want to make sure and
I
point out
came
to
home,
everybody too.
Steve.
No,
I,
well,
I brought him home.
that's another story for another session.
We can't tell
That
that.
is definitely one of the greatest stories ever of Ron determining, when Paciano was asked to do his village service and we knew we needed his help, Ron made it his mission to get Marcos back from the United States where he was working.
Hey, Steve, can I interrupt for 1
Yeah,
second?
sure.
Like, I have a few questions that I'm saving more towards the end, but I think this is really important
Okay, sure.
and it can, we can answer this in regards to all of the producers, because it may not be the same answer, but Roland asked, he would love to hear you talk about the process and importance of building relationships and trust with the mezcaleros. What is the balance of wanting something for them while also wanting something from them? Which I think is a really insightful, awesome question. So,
Such a great question.
yeah.
And I think Ron, having Ron on this call, there's no question he's the one who should speak to that. But I will preface his answer by saying this. In regards to that very delicate relationship and that incredible trust and bond that has been built, we are celebrating, as you know, our 25th year of exporting mezcal to the United States and to the rest of the world. And every single producer that we have ever worked with from the beginning is still working with us. And that, I think, speaks volumes to the relationship, the trust, the respect that we have for one another. And I will let Ron respond to the question, but I think that's a beautiful question. It is absolutely, I think, Misty, you would agree, Gabe too, that it is the single most important thing to all of us, believe it or not. Over everything else, our relationship with the families is the single most important part of our business that we do.
Okay.
To us, keeping that relationship strong, having that bond, being part of all of the family celebrations, with every one of our families, with all of them. We're bringing you back to the original families now, because as you may know, we started with 4 original villages, and these being the first 2. So Ron, would you like to
So,
address that a little bit?
so you know, the regions that I've worked in all these years have been so remote that a white person coming in from outside was unheard of, and people actually didn't travel from village to village. When we went to Chichicapa to get wool, the villagers in Teotihuacan said they kill people over there. They looked at it like going off the flat earth and just falling off. And they were surprised that we came back alive. So when I began to find these producers in these remote villages, they were not only suspicious of me, but because they didn't really leave their villages, they were suspicious of anybody that wasn't from their own village. So when I actually established this relationship with Faustino and then with Paciano, it was an example. I made, I didn't have a lot of money, but I made a small trickle available steadily to them, which was a rarity. They had never had that before. Once a year, a truck would come in and a guy would shout, "Compra mezcal!" And if they were out getting firewood or planting agave, they missed their chance. Well, and then there was no communication because there was only one phone in each village back then, and it was owned by the rich family, and you had to go there and sit and wait and pay to use that phone or to receive a call. I would call down to talk to Paciano, and they would broadcast on a microphone and a speaker, "Paciano." And if he didn't show up, they'd say, "Come back, call back tomorrow, he'll be here." And the phones only worked in the villages half the year sporadically. The lines would break. So I began to establish communication, and the way I would do it was that if we couldn't reach someone to say, "We'll be there in 2 weeks to pick up this mezcal that we promised we'd buy," well, I'd send a truck out 8 hours out and 8 hours back just to let them know that we were coming in 2 weeks. So we provided secure, dependable income, and we provided good communication, 2 things they never had. Now, as we built in these villages, as we built volume, we would provide emergency medical funding if someone got sick in the family. You could depend on us. I'd find somewhere. I borrowed money from Steve Olson 3 times. We'd find money and make sure that they had emergency medical.
It's true.
Okay, if they wanted to improve their house, their family house, if they wanted to improve their palenque, we give them advance money, and they'd pay us back in mezcal over time. I mean, we loan
Or not.
money, we pay money over years, like getting reimbursed. So it was just an opportunity, and we never once told them what to do with this money that they were making. It was up to them. They knew what they needed. they knew how to best use the funding from this mezcal. So we changed a lot of lives. We brought back a lot of sons and daughters from, you know, being outside the country trying to earn money to help support the family. So I've been made a godfather. I can't tell you how many times. When Steve was down with his family, we had Misty was there. We had a huge crew of bartenders and friends for Max and Isabel's wedding, and I was the godfather of the wedding. You know, so
You were also the godfather of their baptism of their sons.
sure.
And you were the patron of the wedding at Santo Domingo with Armando and
I
Daisy. I
think
mean, the list goes on.
I think the most important part of this is like it's about building trust, no? Because
Yes.
you went from the situation of being suspect for many reasons to being reliable, and I think that's the root of the answer, right? It's about building trust, and that's what relationships are
The
built
word
on,
is
right?
spread. Other villages, you know about our relationships, you know.
I think that trust, you're right, Misty, that is exactly the word. And one of the things I think people should know is that from the beginning, Ron always not only treated, but the dialogue was always, they were partners. The Palenqueros, he wasn't treating them like workers. They were partners. They were artist partners, and they were in it together. And I think that changes the dynamic completely when there's that kind of respect and that kind of admiration for one another. And Misty, you've been spending so much time with the families over the years and bringing people into their environments. You've seen the friendship. They're brothers. It's a brotherhood. And we're so honored by that, and we never take that for granted. But we feel like we're part of the family. They're part of our family. We are the family, you know. And here, that's such a beautiful picture. Thank you for sharing that, Misty. That is amazing.
Hey, how
But
about
we
the
should,
name of our little company? Del Maguey
yeah, there you
means
go.
from the plant. You know, it's like it's just starting from where does it come from? From the plant.
From the plant.
From the
Here's
plant.
a picture of Marcos when he was 10 years old that Ron shot and used as the original label for San Luis del Rio. That's it's so amazing. And if
Mark
I'm not mistaken,
was not working. It wasn't child labor.
now
He went, Dad, can I be in the picture? Dad, can I be in the picture?
but this next photo, Ron, you remember this? This is at our 20th anniversary celebration. That's actually my hand, I realized when I saw my bracelets there, but that's Marcos pointing at himself on the original bottle. We saved a couple of old bottles from the original
30
year.
years
20th
old.
anniversary, we popped them open at the end of the night with just the Palenqueros and the team. That was pretty amazing.
Right.
So listen, in respect for everyone's time and to keep this up, well, I'm not going to gloss over that.
Nicholas and
As
June.
we talk about the next generation, we should continue talking about the next generation, because one of the things I will say right now is that Marcos has become one of the finest distillers that I have ever had the great opportunity to work with in all of my years of experience and working in many different spirits categories. He's brilliant, has a natural touch, and clearly taught by his father, who was taught by his father, who was taught by his father, and handed down from generations. And Alejandro will be next. You know, he will learn it. He's already,
Alejandro plays at the Palenque and has like little kids build little forts and play with model cars and stuff like that. Alejandro has a little plastic horse, pulling a stone around in a circle, grinding agave, you know. He has his own little model Palenque. He's already there. He's doing it.
I think one of the things that is incredibly gratifying to us is that every single one of the families we work with has, if you will, a succession plan in place. That's a very corporate way of saying the sons and daughters are there. They're working with their parents, and they all will take over and continue producing. So that's incredible. Oh, there, Florencio. Are we going to talk about Monero right now?
I mean, I feel like
Yeah, we're doing the four
we're gonna
villages,
flash
right?
forward, but I felt like it would
Thank you.
be we had to at least have some photos in here from the roots of each of the original palenques. So sorry,
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
I brought in Florencio here from Minas, which I mean that picture's amazing. Um, this I love from with Esperidion and Juan from Santo Domingo Alvaradas.
Look at Juanito, how young he is. Look at Esperidion. And who's that guy in the middle? Who's that fashion doll in the middle? By the way, if you know Ron Cooper, I just want you to notice that he's taller than them. No, but Misty, your point is very well taken. So there were four villages originally in 1996, and Ron's idea was to show everybody that even though the process is relatively similar, it's almost the same in each village. All of them are roasted underground. All of them are milled by hand or by horse. All of them are fermented in a natural ambient situation in wooden tinas, open air, and all of them made in very small stills. And all of the process is basically the same. That by 1996 and 7, we had 5 villages, so 4 single villages that all had completely different flavors, and yet were made from the same agave in different places by different people. So the hand of the maker and the location became huge, and there they are. So you're right, Misty, it is important that we talk about Chichicapa. Of course, we talked about San Luis del Rio, but we cannot do this and not talk about Santo Domingo Alvaradas and Minero, which were the original 4. And that last picture, of course, was one of the original visits to Santa Maria Alvaradas, where Ron became the first person to put the name of a wild agave on a label and said, well, we're calling it Espadín, which he had done because tequila was calling it blue agave. And he said, well, we need to make sure people know the difference. So he put it as 100% Espadín. So when Tobalá came out, he called it 100% wild Tobalá, to let people know that this is a very, very rare and special wild agave. Now, so this is how it all began. And then, of course, with the evolution, so that we can put this into time context, Tobalá, then Pachuga, then later, sometime later, we released all of the wild agaves and the vinos, Teozacualco, San Jose Rio Minas, San Pedro Tabiche, eventually Puebla. But now we're going to jump forward. And, we've been talking about Mezcal Finds You. We've been talking about the origin stories. And we did something this past year that we've never done. And that was adding a Mezcal to the original village lineup. Now, you may know that Monero, of course, being ancestral and being very, very difficult and very inefficient stills with the clay stills, is considerably more expensive to make and more difficult and in smaller quantities. And we had no choice, but because we respect the artists and the producers and the families that we work with, to respect their need to charge more for it, then we had to move it up a little bit. And we had been working with this village that we'd never released, and we just loved the family and we loved their mezcal. And we finally decided to bring our first new village in the village foursome, and we call it Las Milpas. Well, we don't call it Las Milpas, they do. But Ron, we're going to bring this all around 20 years later on our 25th anniversary to talk about Anastasio Cruz Antonio and the sons, all making mezcal today. When Ron first met them, it was like Faustino all over again. We were brought back 20 years. They didn't have a still. They had a small amount of mezcal. Ron, you can imagine, he's the patron. Ron, taste my mezcal. People would want to work with Ron. Ron's always very polite and yes, okay, but in this case, he went, wait a minute, this is really good. Anyway, Ron, tell the story about Mezcal finding you and Gaspar, and then going out to find the village, and how we finally now are working with this incredibly beautiful family and bringing their mezcal to the United States.
We have time.
I think we can, well, listen, out of respect to everybody here,
So
we
that
understand
100.
that you're all on limited time. It is an hour in, but we're going to stay, right? And we're going to tell this story.
Yeah.
So if you want to jump, we do totally understand, and we should say thank you now and tell you what a huge honor it's been for us to share these stories with you. It's always a pleasure to sit with you, Mr. Cooper, and listen to your stories. And Misty and Gabe, I hope you know how much I love you and respect you, and thank you for this platform and for allowing us to do this and tell these great stories. And to everybody out there, I would just say thank you so much for your incredible support over the years with this unbelievable family. And to our family in hospitality, we thank you. But I would also say to the families that we're so honored to work with, and you're seeing all of these families, it is such an honor for us to bring their art to all of you. And we're just thrilled that you all appreciate it and respect it the way that you do, and that you understand how important many of you have taken on our mission as your mission, that we are here to protect this culture and protect these people and preserve this so that they can keep making mezcal this way, the old way, the ancient way, the traditional way, for as long as they're alive and as long as they choose to. So thank you to all of you. And I promise you, we will all come through this stronger and better than ever. And the hospitality industry will be more important than it's ever been. And every one of you will be part of that growth. So thank you for that. And Ron, if you want to say a word or two to the group that might be signing off, but then for those of you who want to stay, we'll definitely tell you the story of Las Milpas.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm always surprised looking at those photographs of the early days. You know, a lot has changed. There must be 800 mezcal brands now. But back then there was only 3, and 2 of them were chemically made, adulterated mezcals, Monte Alban and Gusano Rojo, and 1 pure one, Del Maguey. So it was quite an adventure, and the adventure goes on. I mean, Paciano Cruz in Alaska loves to go out and find new fields and plant and clear and grow maguey. I love to go out every once in a while, just on an adventure and discover a new producer. So I'm not stopping doing that.
Yeah.
But Anastasio, one Sunday, came to our little village of Teotitlan carrying a little 5-liter gas can, plastic gas can, full with his mezcal. And I had been at the regional market in Tlacolula, and I came back to Teotitlan, and I realized that I hadn't stopped to see my compadre for a month or 2. And I stopped to see the father of Demetrio, who's my godson, and salute him. And here's this guy sitting next to him, and he says, you know, he introduced me, Don Gaspar introduces me to Anastasio, says he makes good mezcal. And I went, yeah, right. And he went, no, go in the kitchen. Go down to the kitchen and bring back some glasses. And I bring back a Fred Flintstone jelly jar and some flowered glasses, and pour some of this mezcal, and I'm prepared to like drink something horrendous. And it was this incredible elixir. And I said, hey, can I buy a liter of this from you? And he went, no, you have to buy all 5 liters. Okay, I'll do it. But give me your gas can, and I'll go down and pour it into some bottles I've got in the bodega, which is like 300 feet behind. And I did. And this is it right here. I mean, I've only drunk 1.5 liters out of this, right? And then the other two are gone, but I bought the whole 5 liters. And Anastasio came down, and there was this huge, on the corner of the building, there was this huge hive of bees that were, moving from one place to the other. And he came in swatting and getting stung by bees. And I gave him back his 5 liter plastic gas can and paid him. And I said, "How do I find you?" And he said, "Oh, I'm in Las Milpas. Here's a phone number of my nephew, who is the vocal, the right-hand man of the president of this village, San Dionisio." So a year went by, and I had these visitors from Kyoto, Japan, and Steve Reichlin, the king of barbecue. And we were going to go out to Chichicapa and Minas. And I said, "Hey, let's see if we can find Anastasio." So I called this number, and they said, "Well, he's at a wedding. His son's getting married. And here, he'll meet you. He'll meet you at the village market." And so we drove, about an hour and a half to get to San Dionisio. We picked up Anastasio, and he drove us up through the village to this place at the wedding of his son, who's seated there in the blue shirt, Rigo, whose birthday was yesterday. And it was the day after the wedding, so everyone was a little hungover. The women were washing these giant green clay mole cooking pots, and the uncles and all the relatives were there, and they pulled up a table for us and brought this special wedding mezcal. And we sipped it, and we did salutes to Rigoberto and his wife and the family. And Anastasio said, "I'll show you the way out of the village." And as we left, I said, "Well, let's go to Las Milpas. It means the cornfields." And he laughed and he went, no, look up there. And there's this zigzag road with dog legs, really bad corners going up over the mountain. He said, "It's over 2 mountain ranges back there." And he said, "Call me again and we'll get together. We'll go up there sometime." So that was the beginning of our relationship with him.
And it is very remote, as you'll see in some of these photos. There's a picture of Rigoberto right there, and you can see how beautiful it is behind him. It is the top of the world. And calling it a town is using the term really loosely. They're ranchos. They're just a collection of ranchos that are like next to one another. And there is a little community center. Here's the roast. So when I first went there, shortly thereafter, we had determined that we were going to, quote unquote, put them into business, like with Faustino. But 20 years later, they didn't have a still. They had rented the still to make this beautiful mezcal that Ron had shared with us. We all agreed that this family was the kind of family we wanted to work with, and the mezcal was mind-blowing. We had to have it. And so we helped them build. They built it, but we helped financially so that they could build their own palenque. This is the most amazing horno because it's literally carved out of granite and agate in the cliffside there. It's solid rock inside, not lined with rocks, but actual rock cut out that they chiseled out. And they started like everyone else, with 1 alambique, 2 tinas, 1 molino, The most important thing for them was the roof. We had to put in a techo, and you can see it right there because they had to build it in the side of the cliff, and the roof was absolutely essential. So there you see the original Molino. And then now at this point in this photo, I think there's a third Tina. That's a beautiful shot, Misty. I love that shot looking out.
That's a
That's
Gabe
clearly
Forte
summertime.
shot.
That's a Gabe. Way to go, Gabe. Now you can see the difference. See how brown it is there. So this is clearly, before the rainy season, that's very hot and dry there. Because here, look at how green it is. It's so gorgeous up there. Some of the most beautiful sunsets. And we're so lucky to work with this family. They're absolutely beautiful people. This is the day, Ron said, I just love this photo so much. This is the day when we went up there to bring them their mezcal bottled for the very first time. And they were, look how they're so happy.
With their label.
Yeah, with their first time, with their name on it, with their label, and we were ecstatic. We hadn't even released it yet. We just wanted them to have it and see it and taste it out of the bottle to see. And of course, we had assured them that the mezcal was exactly the way it came out of their still. I'll never forget at our 20th anniversary when our producer from Puebla was just starting to work with us, and he saw all of the mezcals, and he said to me, so, because we had them all there, 30 mezcals all lined up on a table for everyone to see and taste, and some of them didn't have labels yet, including his. And he said, so then you'll take my mezcal and you'll make it yours and you'll put it in this fancy bottle. And I said, whoa, hey, hang on. No, we don't make anything ours. Said, it's your mezcal. It's your flavor. It's your palenque. All we're going to do is put a beautiful label on it. And so when I brought it to him, I was so excited for him to taste it. This is that day. Actually, you know what this is, Ron? This is the day of the first distillation. This is the day when we went up, when they had the first drops coming out of the still and we shot off the fireworks with Jimmy. Remember that? That's that day. I remember because of that cool sweatshirt you'd gotten from the people, I think in Holland, if I recall. There we are.
So we're obviously we've already run over, but there are a few questions. So as I go through these last slides, if you don't mind me asking some questions that came in.
I think this is self-explanatory, right? I mean, this is our 20th anniversary with all of our palenques coming together. Some of them had never met each other before at this point. Some of the original ones had by this time, but many hadn't.
So Ron, Lisa, who works with Pernod Ricard in San Francisco, was just confirming. Gabe, respond to that. I'm sorry. That how many cases were the first shipment of Chichicapa that went to the U.S.?
Well, there were let's see, 56 total, 23 Chichi, 23 San Luis.
Oh, nice, awesome. And then Tom Parks is asking.
12 bottle cases back in those days.
There were 12 bottle cases?
Oh, yeah, big deal.
Oh, wow. Like normal. So that'd be 28 cases of each if it's 56 total, right?
Right.
And then Tom was asking, when you were talking about Santa Fe, you mentioned Rusty. And he was asking who Rusty was, because I think he might have some connections there. Was it Rusty Rutherford?
No, it was Rusty Rainiers. He's a photographer that went to Art Center School in LA. Was introduced to me by a photographer friend, Paul O'Connor, who did actually Steve thought I made the early photographs of Faustino and of Marcos, but in actual fact, I took Paul O'Connor down and he made these beautiful photographs that became our first bottle labels. So Rusty Rainiers was an early seed investor that helped me start Del Maguey, and he was the one that received legally the first shipment of Del Maguey into the United States.
Okay, cool. And then Pablo was asking if there is an issue in regards to taster quality if you keep mezcal in plastic bottles, because you have that bottle of delicious Las
Oh,
Vegas there.
yeah, no. Um, well, first of all, I have something that I think most people have called taste memory. Okay. I can remember what Santo Domingo Alvarado's taste like right now, you know. I'm not a professional sommelier trained. I have no vocabulary, but I can remember the taste of something. And it's very important to me. If I can't remember the taste of something, I don't want to drink it again. I don't want to, you know, yeah, it's not worth tasting again. So the question was,
In regards to
Missy,
keeping your spirits in a plastic bottle.
right. You know, it's scary sometimes because people have talked about these three-letter chemicals to keep stuff
PDAs. Yeah.
soft, but I have, you know, I think that all of our people do use plastic because it is cured by the mezcal. So I haven't had samples analyzed ever that show from keeping in plastic that it has degraded the mezcal. The mezcal actually is strong enough to cure the container that it's in. And we
Um,
had done analysis
yes, we have.
because Pernod Ricard wanted us to put everything in stainless steel, and we were keeping it all in these food grade 1,100 liter cubitaners, and we had it analyzed, and all of it was not affected.
Yeah,
So
there were absolutely no PVAs in any of the mezcals that we've tested. You should know that the mezcal that we have at the bodega is not kept in plastic. It's mostly kept in glass, which is more traditional. But like Ron, you can see it on my back bar too. I keep a lot of my mezcal in plastic, and I do rigorous tasting, blind tasting on it, checking it, because I've been fascinated by this thing. Because at the beginning, I would transfer it from plastic into glass right away because I didn't want anything to happen. And then I realized that it wasn't changing. I want to comment very quickly, if I may, Misty. And, you know, Ron says, you know, he doesn't have the training. He's not a sommelier. Misty, who has one of the greatest palates of anyone that I've ever had the pleasure of working with, will confirm this. But Ron says he doesn't have the vocabulary, but he does have the memory. I would like to say that when I first tasted with Ron 25 years ago, I was fascinated because I do have the training and I teach this all over the world, as most of you know. I was fascinated tasting with Ron because he had such a just a complete innate ability to just get it. And so I listened, I paid attention. I was trying to figure out how he was doing it. And what I realized very quickly is that Ron, and it could be his artist background, it might be natural, I'm not sure. There is actually a group of people that taste this way, but Ron tastes in color. So Ron's descriptors, if you talk to Ron using colors and using textures and using the things that, quite frankly, would be a lot easier to describe to our guests anyway, then Ron has a very vivid memory and description of exactly. And once you start deciphering what those colors mean to Ron, this is how we've worked for all these years. Is I instead of converting Ron to some sort of mechanized way of tasting, is like, no, you taste the way you taste. It's my job to figure out what that means to me. And it is absolutely amazing to me watching Ron taste and listening to him and tasting with him. And I will say this, I have the hardest job in the world is the quality control. I have the great pleasure of being involved with Arturo and tasting every single lot that we bring into the bodega before it's released, for consistency, for quality control, before it's analyzed, for sensorial analysis. And I can tell every single person on this call that not only do I have that job, but not one drop of mezcal has ever been sent out to the world without Ron's approval. Ron is very, very involved to this day on saying, yep, I love it. We don't make changes. We don't make adjustments. We don't blend. We honor their craft, and everything is tasted by us, and Ron approves it all. So, yes.
You know what's left in my copita? The smell of fresh roast agave.
Mm.
I love that.
I mean, I'm just blown away. It just, you forget these things, and I just am smelling, and I smell fresh roast agave here.
It's beautiful.
That's what's left in this copita.
That's so important in a lot of ways.
Any other questions?
Yeah, we definitely
I want to
have
give
more
a shout
questions.
out to Carlos Ituria's family.
So
I love you.
So, in regards to Las Milpas and talking about the Horno and how it's chiseled out of the rock, and is that part of the Las Milpas flavor?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Every, there's actually a video of me talking about what I think are the 7 factors that create flavor in mezcal. And the hand of the maker is one. The microclimate, the altitude is really important because we don't add yeast. They're all native yeast that live in the, every 100 meters, every 300 feet, microbes that live in the air that you don't even see, eat the sugars in the roast agave and convert it to alcohol. The wood that's used in the fire to heat the rocks, that then once the fire's gone and the rocks are red hot, the hearts go in and get roast. That is the varietal of the agave is a factor. The water, because we don't ever add water to mezcal, but we do once the roast agave hearts are ground, all the meats and fibers and juices go into the fermentation, and after 2 days, a certain percentage of village water is added to give a medium for the microbes to reproduce in. And so village water counts, all of these factors. And time is the most important thing. It takes a long time for mezcal to be made, for the plants to mature, for the harvest, for the roast, for the grinding, for the ferment, for the distillation. It takes a long time, and we respect that. So those are some of the factors that create flavor in mezcal. So of course, whatever, if some of Chichicapa has stone and cement roasting pit, okay, but it just like the plastic bottles, it gets cured. It gets the making of mezcal is very, very strong, and it overpowers other elements. So it speaks for itself.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
It should be pointed out on the water supply that every one of the producers, these families, have a very unique and special water supply, whether it be a mountain spring, a manantial, or whether it be from a well, an artesian well perhaps, that's dug on the property. And we have found over the years that that is one of the most important elements of the flavors, is that little bit of water that's used in the fermentation.
River water from San Luis Del Rio.
River water, yeah. In every case, it's really quite remarkable. I mean, I know it's traditional when Misty brings a small group up to Santa Maria Alboradas, she always has everyone fill their water bottles out of the manantial there at Santa Maria, because it might be the most delicious water that you'll ever taste in your lives. You're up in the mountains and it's just beautiful and pure. Hey, look at that photo, Ron.
We
Who are
do have
those
a couple
crazy?
more questions. I mean, we're going super over, so I want to get to these real quick in
Sure,
case
go ahead.
people have to
Misty.
bounce. David said, if I'm not mistaken, at the bodega during bottling, you use the tails to adjust the ABV down, which is more at the palenque. But he said, do you ever have to adjust the ABV up? And if so, how do you do that?
It's a great
Well,
question. We don't actually. And every once in a while you go, oh boy, what happens? If they go a little bit lower, originally Ron bottled the ABVs at what they were, just whatever they came off. So we've worked from that place ever since. You're right about the tails. That is used to bring them to balance. It's actually done at the palenques, not in the bodega at all. It comes to the bodega finished. But every once in a while, if it's maybe just a couple of tenths of a degree below or whatever, then you have to wait for the next distillation, and you bring the next distillation a little bit higher and blend them. A lot of mezcal, as it's called, can be it's more than, it doesn't have to only be one distillation. It can be more than one distillation as long as it's from the same palenque. And so, for example, and it would never happen, but Faustino is 48. But let's say he made a batch and it came in at 47. Well, then the next batch he would make it 49 or 50, and then we'd blend them together and balance it. That's all. But otherwise, you would never, ever adjust the alcohols. And the only adjustment is really it's distilled down to proof. And sometimes a little balance of the tails are used just to bring it into exactly the right level. Great question.
When I started, the producers separated the heads, which are proportionately like a head, the body, which are proportionately like a body, and the tails. The heads have tons of flavor and are very high alcohol. The body is about where you want it, uh, you know, and then the tails don't have a lot of alcohol, but they have a lot of nose, and they have acids that create, like wines, make you salivate. And producers uh, actually take these three pieces that they've saved and put them back together, and that makes their final mezcal. But once in a while, we get some los primeros 500 gotas, the first 500 drops, which are so fruity and so high in alcohol, you can't believe it. And then sometimes we get los terceros, which are the third 20 liters out of the still, which have a real unique treasured flavor. So there's a lot to the art of taking these parts of the distillation and putting them together into your final mezcal. So, Faustino and I always have this thing. You saw the picture of him with the bamboo pipette and the half gourd with all the pearls. Well, that's how they read the proof and the purity. So he and I've learned over the years to be able to read those pearls as well. But we always have a little argument, and he always wins.
He always wins.
He always wins. Like he's going 48, and I go, no, it's 47.5%. And Arturo's there with an alcohol thermometer and a temperature thermometer and measures it. And it looks like I'm going to win this time. But then he takes out this chart because of temperature variation, and he reads exactly by temperature, and Faustino wins.
Every time.
So we play this wonderful, exquisite game of reading the pearls and telling the proof. And these guys are just geniuses. They're really beautiful geniuses at making this miraculous spirit. Next question.
Next question. So Federico Fisher, who's been to Oaxaca with me, was asking if there's a particular story behind the label of Tobala.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
somebody
Well,
wanted to ask that last time we were on, Misty, and we didn't get to it. I saw it. It's like, why is it different than the other ones? Great question.
all right, Ken Price, who I've known, I've had the great luck of knowing since I was 19 years old. We shared a Victorian house on the beach in Ventura, California, on California Street, which was a great surf point. And the house was divided into four two-story house divided into 4 apartments. And this artist lived in one facing the ocean. And we became friends. He took me to LA and introduced me to the entire LA art world. And he's the guy, he's like one of the greatest ceramic sculptors in the world. And he's the guy that gave me all the drawings for all our labels. And it was his fantasy of what southern Mexico was, because he had never been there. And at night he would lay in bed. His wife was a voracious reader, and he would draw these fantasy drawings. And he gave me all of these to use as labels for Del Maguey. So one day he gives me this round drawing with these big semi trucks and a little pink car. And I go, what the fuck is that? How can I possibly use that as a label? And then I went, oh, I got it. Yeah, I got it. It's like the big trucks, you know how dangerous people drive in Mexico on these windy, narrow roads. Truck drivers and bus drivers and people drive like crazy. Well, here's this little pink car, and that's Del Maguey amidst those big tequila companies, winding through the mountains. And that's how that label happened. He just did it, and he had no explanation for it. And he gave me this circular drawing, and everything else was a rectangle. And I went, what am I going to do with that? And then I went, oh, yeah, okay. So Tobala is so unique that became the label for Tobala. And it's just like the road to Santa Maria Alvarados.
Yes, it is. One last question we have. Joseph asked, in between distillation and bottling, how common is it to let mezcal rest in large plastic or glass jugs? And if so, how long on average would that be?
Oh, boy. Such a good question. Look at, and what a photo to have right now too, Misty. A ceramic jug.
Well, there's a clay Cantero negro, black clay jug. So that is the traditional way of storing mezcal in these black clay pots.
In Minas.
Well, in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And then they were replaced by glass, like 5-gallon glass water jugs. And then they were replaced by unbreakable plastic containers. I brought down 200 stainless steel beer barrels used for Pearl or Pabst in the first year that I was producing in Mexico. They were really inexpensive, and they came from San Antonio. And it was really a painful ordeal getting legal permission to import these barrels into Mexico. However, I succeeded. And, to this day, Chichicapa loves storing in stainless steel beer barrels. Um, Other people store in black clay jugs, other people store in glass, other people store in plastic. Um, Depending on how sales go, we sit around on some mezcals for 2 years before they're bottled and get to leave the country. Um, and mezcal ages in anything. It just gets softer and softer. So like I just sipped 2 days ago. I found a bottle of 2012 Arroqueño made by Florencio Carlos. I can't believe it. It's just
Wow.
it's so soft. It's amazing, So they don't lose their alcoholic potency,
No.
but just the mouthfeel and the flavors just mature. So if you have any bottles of mezcal that you can set aside, they will really, really, really become treasures over the years.
Misty, I would just, if I may, jump in on a production note there also. Over the many years, we've learned also that the families have certain traditions that we started on. I remember sitting with Ron once, and out of one of those cantaros, we drank Monero that had been in one for 6 months, and my brain exploded. This is 20 years ago, because I'd never thought about what a difference it would make between out of the still and in clay, and it began to change the way we looked at it. One of the things that we do these days is there are certain mezcals that need time at the bodega, that need time in glass. For example, Tobola. You'll notice that you'll never see a bottle of Tobola that's less than 2 years old. And that is out of pure respect to Rogelio, because some years ago, we recognized that he was always serving us Tobola that was 2 seasons old. It's a seasonal thing. And in asking him, his answer was the middle fills in. So we respect that. So we keep Tobola in glass for 2 years. In the case of Monero, we find that everything that comes from the family in Santa Catarina Minas, made in those clay stills, just requires more time at the bodega before we can send it to the United States. Because we don't remember when Ron said earlier he tasted Faustino's mezcal 2 weeks later and it was exactly the way he remembered it, but it hadn't been originally. Well, different mezcals have different windows. So Baril, for example, takes a few years. Arroqueño takes a couple of years. Tobola takes a couple of years. And certain villages just have traditions that we respect, and we honor that. On the other hand, certain villages are almost better when they're really, really young. I mean, they certainly tend to age in the bottle, but Chichicapa, San Luis del Rio, Vida, Santo Domingo Alvaradas, they're all mezcals that we release right from the still because they're beautiful and fruity and over the top in their minerality when they're really young, and then they settle in over time in the bottle. So it varies from place to place, but anything that requires more than just transit from the palenque to the bodega to bottling goes into glass. Now that's how we do it today, because we can't get those Cantaro Negros anymore.
We have a couple different questions here that are on the same topic, so I'll try to wrap them up into one conversation. And it's all around oxidation, right? So does the taste of mezcal change after a bottle is opened? Should you be tasting it right when you open it? Should you be tasting it days later? Is
Oh
it
my God.
okay? Are we
What
protecting?
geeks? We have got geeks out there.
I
can't
love it.
believe it.
That makes me
Here's
so
the-
happy, Ron.
Here's the deal. We have got some geeks. I love it.
But
But
think of it this way: it's
I
respect.
figured out, in the beginning, uh, you know, uh, one of the things is we refuse to make a reposado or an añejo, okay? But we do reserve the right to experiment. So we have put some mezcals in some exotic wood vessels for limited amounts of time, but in really small quantities. But I realized early that wood aging does three things primarily. I mean, Steve will be able to correct me on this, but number one, the tannins in oak, okay, soften alcohol. And then the vanillins in oak sweeten alcohol. And nobody talked about this back when I started Del Maguey in 95, but oxygen oxidizes and softens alcohol. So that was my own explanation for myself, my rationalization as to why these mezcals were getting better in the bottle over age was oxidization. Okay, so people talk about that now, but they didn't really talk about that as a component. They might have known it intuitively, non-verbally, not thought about it or talked about it back in 95, but in reality, people were talking about vanillins and tannins. But in reality, oxidization is a major component in softening alcohol.
And to that end, Ron, I would just say that to your question about opening the bottle, that's exactly correct. If you open the bottle, it won't change the flavors. It won't change the textures. It won't change any of the components if you were to measure and analyze. What it will do is just soften the edges a little bit. So I know many people who, when they get their mezcal, they open it. I think it's more of an excuse
How
just
about
to
a bottle of wine? You
have a
want
Steegee
it.
Bay, you know?
You
Yeah,
want
except because it's such high alcohol, it'll last forever.
Yeah.
So once it's open, it doesn't change immensely, but it will soften out the edges just a notch. And if you ever pull down a bottle that you've had on the back bar for a long time, and it's like a third full, and you pour it and you go, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful right now, it tends to get a little creamier, right? It tends to get a little bit softer and more creamy in the mouth because it doesn't have the sharper edges of the alcohol. That's it. The alcohol itself, the ABV does not change. The acids do not change. It just, the texture of it tends to round out, to your point, Ron, about this mild oxidation. But it won't hurt the mezcal. If anything, it'll help it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's funny because you.
In Meatla in 95 had a 200-liter drum, a barrel, 55-gallon drum, steel. And he kept his mezcal in there. But any mezcal he got, he would pour in there. So
just the opposite of you.
He had stuff from 20 years ago in there. He had stuff from 4 days ago in there. And he didn't plug up the top. And I went, oh my God, aren't you losing alcohol? Is it evaporating? I went, don't worry about it. He says, it just stays the same.
It's like a Solera. It's a
Eso
mezcal
los
Solera.
parachitos.
They just add protein. What were you going to say? You were going to say something.
Right next to his family altar. The altar was there with all the saints and everything, and this 55-gallon drum sitting right next to it.
It's awesome. No, I was gonna say that like Ron tastes in colors, I taste in shapes, right? So that's that when I was bartending, that's how I would describe, like, if there were two cocktails that were very similar to one another and people were asking how they were different, a lot of times I'd talk in the shapes of how they hit your palate, right? And so when people ask me the oxidation question, I always say the same thing, that it rounds out the edges, right? And the corners disappear. It goes from being a rectangle or a diamond to being an oval, or
A great way to describe it.
Yeah,
really
so that's
very
definitely something that resonates with me.
Very accurate. That's a great way for people to really grab onto an image and expect And then, of course, as we know, as servers, as bartenders, what's the single most important thing you can do is earn the trust of your guest. Well,
Mm.
you just earned it because you described it, and it was exactly the way you described it, and now they trust you, and now you can take them on that beautiful journey that you were hoping to take them on.
Yeah. All right, that's it. It went almost twice as much time as we anticipated, but
I'm so surprised.
Well, about 4 times as many people as I anticipated.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
But for those of you that are still here with us, you'll be getting an email. We have one more week of our 3 sessions of deep dives, and next week Gabe will be back talking about, Gabe's our Director of Sustainability at Maguey. He's going to be talking about our initiatives specifically, but some broad strokes around being sustainable in agave spirits. So you'll have an opportunity to easily sign up for that and be back with us next week. But thank you all so much for being with us today. And if you have any other questions, you'll also get an email. Just email them to me, and I'm happy to follow up with all of you. Do you
Thank
guys have final words, Ron?
Just thank you for sharing with us. That's all.
I echo that. Thank you. It's such an honor for us. I have to pinch myself every single day that that we are where we are, and that I watched as Ron was completely broke and put everything he had into this for so many years, always with the idea that, yeah, but some things you just have to do. You just have to do them because it's the right thing to do. And the fact that all of you have embraced this and have the same kind of respect for the ritual beverage, the spirituality, the ancestral production, and that you help us with this mission of protecting that and preserving that and making sure that these artisans have the opportunity to make this beautiful liquid art for as long as they choose to. It's such an honor. I would just say this to all of you: stay strong, stay safe. We are going to come out of this, and when we do, we're going to be needed. people need to go out and have a drink, and they need to be taken care of, and we can do that, and we will. So thank you. And Misty and Gabe, thank you guys for setting this up.
Gabe, thanks. Steve, thank you.
Love you guys.
See y'all soon, hopefully.
Love all of you. Thank you.
In person one of these days, right?
Exactamente.
Right.
Gracias.
Adios. A te watcho.
Hasta luego.
Hasta pronto.
Bye, Gabe.